What if stealing something as simple as a piece of ribbon could get you exiled to the other side of the planet? Sounds insane, right? Well, today we're diving into one of the wildest forms of punishment ever invented: transportation. I know, it sounds like something straight out of a movie, but for more than 160,000 real people, this was their life. So you have to ask, how did a justice system get so incredibly brutal? A system that basically said a piece of cloth was worth more than a person's entire life. Okay, to get our heads around this, we need to travel back in time. We're going to 18th century Britain. And picture this: you've got unbelievable wealth right next to the most desperate poverty you can imagine. And the whole thing is held together by laws that were just stunningly cruel. So, London's population is exploding, and the rich are getting seriously paranoid about the poor, the so-called criminal class. Their answer? Something they called the Bloody Code. Get this, it made over 200 different crimes punishable by death. We're talking about things as small as stealing a handkerchief. The message couldn't have been clearer. Your life is worth less than my stuff. But, there was a snag. The Bloody Code was so extreme that juries, well, they just weren't having it. They'd refuse to convict someone for stealing bread if it meant sending them to be hanged. I mean, can you blame them? So the jails started overflowing, Parliament needed a new plan, and they came up with a pretty grim one: transportation. Instead of hanging you, they just send you away, forever. Now, this wasn't just some random thing. Oh no, there was a very, very specific list of crimes that could get you that one-way ticket to oblivion. So what do you think was on that list? You're probably thinking, murder, treason, the big stuff, right? Well, you'd be wrong. The real list was a lot weirder. And honestly, some of it is just bizarre. Okay, just look at some of these. Grand larceny. That was the big one, stealing anything worth more than a shilling. But then it gets weird. Stealing from a bleaching ground. Yeah, that means if you stole someone's clothes while they were laid out in a field to dry, you could be exiled. Or how about cutting down young trees? Vandalize a rich guy's garden? Say goodbye to your home forever. It just shows you how obsessed they were with protecting property, down to the smallest thing. And these weren't just abstract rules. These were real people. People like Elizabeth Thompson. She was 24 years old, and her crime? Stealing a single piece of ribbon. That's it. Because she'd been in trouble for minor theft before, that little ribbon was enough to get her sentenced to 7 years of transportation. It tore her away from her entire world. So once you were sentenced, you might think the worst was over, but you'd be so wrong. The punishment had barely begun. The journey to Australia, it was a nightmare beyond imagination. Even before you set sail, you'd probably spend months rotting away in something called a hulk. These were old, decommissioned warships, just floating prisons anchored in the river. They were absolutely jam-packed with people: men, women, kids, stuck in total filth, riddled with disease. Just an awful, awful place to wait. And then the voyage. We're talking 14,000 miles to the other side of the planet. For most people back then, that might as well have been another galaxy. It was, quite literally, the end of their world. And remember, this is the age of sailing ships. This trip took anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Just try to imagine that. Being locked below deck for half a year. No escape from the heat, the smell, the hopelessness. Just endless ocean. For a horrifying number of people, this journey was a death sentence. There was one fleet, the Second Fleet, that became known as the Death Fleet. And for good reason. A full 25% of the convicts on board died during the voyage. That's 1 in every 4 people. Just gone. So what was it like down there? Well, it was a living hell. You're chained up in the dark. The air is foul. The ceiling is so low you can't even stand up straight. For months. The food they gave you was basically salt meat and hard biscuits. The water was disgusting. And diseases like scurvy and dysentery were everywhere. It was a fight for survival every single day. But let's say you did it. You survived the journey. You finally set foot on land. You'd think you'd be free, right? Wrong. You've just arrived in a brand new prison and your life still isn't your own. So what happens next? Most convicts ended up in what was called the assignment system. Basically, you were handed over to a free settler to work as unpaid labor. It was pretty much a form of slavery. And let's be clear, the early Australian colony was built on the backs of these convicts. Their labor, their suffering. That's what built the place. And your life from that point on was a total lottery. It all depended on who you were assigned to. Get a decent master, you might get fed properly, learn some skills, and maybe even get a ticket of leave for early freedom. But if you got a cruel master, it was straight up slavery. Overworked, starved, and beaten. And if you messed up, if you broke the rules in this new world, they had places for you. Places like Port Arthur. Think of it as a supermax prison inside a giant prison colony. It was known for its psychological torture, especially something called the silent system. Prisoners were forbidden from speaking at all, sometimes for years. The whole point was to completely break your mind. This whole system of transportation went on for 80 years. It's what fundamentally built a nation. But the craziest part of this story might be how Australia now looks back on these dark origins. It's completely flipped. So yeah, the clock starts ticking in 1788 with the first fleet, and it doesn't stop until 1868 when the very last convict ship arrives. For 80 years, this was how Australia was built. And the sheer scale of it is staggering. We're talking about roughly 162,000 men, women, and even children shipped over in chains. Today, millions of people can trace their family history back to one of them. And this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. For generations, if you had a convict ancestor, it was a huge family secret, a source of shame. People would hide it. But now, it's completely the opposite. It's a source of pride. Australians are digging into their family trees, excited to find a convict. They see them not as criminals, but as the ultimate survivors who built their country from nothing. So that leaves us with this one big question. When you look back at that list of crimes, stealing a ribbon, cutting down a tree, you realize these weren't master criminals. Many were just desperate people, guilty of being poor. So were they really criminals who deserved to be banished? Or were they just survivors? Survivors of a brutal system who, against all odds, ended up building a nation? What do you think?